So you've probably heard the phrase, America first, right? Well, under that banner, the Trump administration made a huge shift, pulling the U.S. out of a whole bunch of international agreements. But what was really going on there? Was it just about leaving, or was there a bigger idea at play? Let's dig into the source material and see if we can unpack it.
So, just how big of a withdrawal are we talking about? Well, the number you need to know is 66. Yep, that's how many international groups and treaties the Trump administration announced the U.S. was pulling out of. That is a massive, massive change in foreign policy.
And the reason given for this huge pullback? It really all boiled down to this one phrase. The official line was that these organizations and treaties just didn't, quote-unquote, serve American interests anymore. That simple statement set the tone for this whole new philosophy.
All right, let's zoom in on a really big one. One of the most talked about withdrawals was from a UN climate treaty. But not just any treaty. This one has been called the grandfather of all the climate agreements that came after it.
So you might be wondering, was this just for show? A symbolic move to make a point? Or did it have real, lasting consequences? Well, according to the perspective we're looking at, this was way, way more than just symbolism.
The agreement we're talking about is the UNFCCC. Now, this isn't just another climate deal. It's the big one, the foundational treaty signed way back in 1992. They call it the grandfather because, well, pretty much every major UN climate plan since then, including the famous Paris Accord, grew out of this original agreement. It's the root of the whole thing.
And this is where the strategy really starts to come into focus. The argument goes like this. Pulling out of the Paris Accord, that was a move that a future president could pretty easily reverse. But pulling out of the UNFCCC itself, the actual treaty, that's a whole different ballgame. The claim is that it would be much harder to undo, maybe even requiring a full new Senate vote to get back in. It's like going from a temporary change to trying to make a permanent break.
And it didn't just stop with the UNFCCC. The source also highlights leaving other UN groups, like the Population Fund and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC. The guest in our source actually characterizes the IPCC as being more of a political group than a purely scientific one.
And this quote from the guest, wow, it really tells you everything you need to know about his perspective. He doesn't see these moves as the U.S. retreating from the world. He calls it a day of liberation and the ultimate example of a true America First policy.
Okay, so that's the global stage. But how does this kind of thinking show up closer to home? Let's completely switch gears for a second and dive into a really fascinating local debate happening in Massachusetts that, believe it or not, touches on some of these very same ideas.
So check this out. At the center of it all is a new bill being proposed, and its main goal, on the surface, is to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions by actually limiting how many miles people can drive their own cars. Right away, that makes you think, okay, what would a policy like that actually mean for me? For the average person just trying to get to work or run errands. From the perspective we're exploring, this is seen as a direct hit on your personal freedom and mobility. Now, according to the guest's take, this bill would put a 15-person council in charge of enforcing these driving limits. He sees this as more than just a simple push to get people on the bus. He argues it's part of a much bigger plan to limit freedom of movement, and he points to similar policies in places like California and Colorado as a model. And here's where it all connects back. The guest doesn't think this is just some isolated state law. No, he links it directly to ideas coming from global groups like the World Economic Forum, claiming they've talked about things like getting rid of private car ownership altogether. And it all boils down to this one really powerful idea that sums up the whole argument against these kinds of rules. It's the belief that your car isn't just a way to get from point A to point B. It's a symbol and a tool of your personal freedom.
So, hang on, how do we connect pulling out of international climate treaties with a local debate about how much you can drive? What's the link? Well, the common thread, as presented here, is this idea of freedom of movement, both for a country on the world stage and for you as an individual.
So you see, what the source material is really laying out is this fundamental clash, this kind of tug-of-war. On one side, you've got regulations and global agreements designed to achieve collective goals, like fighting climate change. And on the other side, you have the principle of individual liberty, the freedom for a nation to choose its own path, and the freedom for a person to travel where and when they want.
And that really leaves us with the big final question that this whole topic brings up. As we all try to figure out how to handle huge challenges like climate change, where do we draw the line?
What's the right balance between doing things for the common good and protecting our individual freedoms? That's the core tension here, and it's definitely something to think about.